This is my movie review of 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. And before I get into, let's go through the cast for writing credits: Sam Mendes with Christy Wilson and Cairns. Let's go through the cast. It's a extremely strong cast, but basically the film is really about two men. Let's describe them anyway. Lance Corporal Blake is played by Dean Charles Chapman, and Lance Corporal Schofield is played by George McKay. We also see supporting cast members: Daniel Mays, Sergeant Sanders, and Colin Firth, General Errymore. We see them at the beginning of the movie, and towards the end of the movie we see Benedict Cumberbatch as Colonel Mackenzie, and we also witness another significant member of the cast, who is Blake's brother, and I'm just trying to get the credit on that, but it escapes me. It's because the number of performances. Yes, Richard Madden plays Lieutenant Joseph Blake. Now, quickly, the awards. We've already had the Golden Globes, and of course it won a Best Picture drama. Also, Sam Mendes won Best Director, and it was nominated for Best Original Score. The score is absolutely breathtaking, and the person responsible is Thomas Newman. The BAFTAs, which has just been completed again, the director Mendes won the Best Director award. It won for Outstanding British Film of the Year. It won for Best for Cinematography for Roger Deakins. A word about Deakins: this film could not have been made without his expertise. As I will get into the movie, it becomes perfectly evident that the man responsible for the cinematography on this film is by far the most important person in this film, based on the fact that many of you will be aware that it was basically one shot, one take from beginning to end. There was no cutting, there was no editing as such. It went down as one take. And to the Oscars, which are due this month, we've got in total 9 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Cinematography, and Best Original Play. There's just one thing that I would like to point out. I'm absolutely staggered that the Best Acting nomination for George McKay, he is not around, and he should be around. He is in every frame of this film, and his performance is one of the most jaw-dropping performances in a movie of this nature that I've ever seen. So let's get to the movie, shall we? So it's April the 6th, 1917. We're on the battlefields in France. We're in a situation where both camps are bedded in their areas. The infamous name No Man's Land is between the two. The trenches are where these people live, fight and die. And we arrive at the beginning of the film and find that the two lead characters, Blake and Schofield, are about to be woken up in a field, a matter of meters from the trenches, and they are woken up and told to report to General Errymore, played by Colin Firth, and the film then begins with them walking back with the camera in front of them towards the trenches. The longer they walk, the more impacting the visuals are on you, as we start from a very nice, pretty meadow, and we retreat to more and more carnage and atrocity as we go further into the where the troops are engaged in the trenches. This in itself is a complete insight as to what we're dealing with here, the Great War, the meaningless war, and I'm sure Mendes was trying to convey that. We spot as we walk down such things of troops who look completely shell-shocked. One has a little dog, a terrier dog, that's visibly shaking, probably from terror, and it certainly encapsulates where we are located. And the reality sets in. Mays then accompanies the two men into a sort of underground sort of dugout. It's not really underground, into a tent area where Firth, who plays General Eremore, is with his lieutenants, and describes to the two men their mission. At this stage, I'd already had visual pictures of paths of glory, given the fact that the walk through the trenches was very much a part of that movie. And once the mission has been laid out, a mission that to all intents and purposes looks like suicide, the men are told that the information is that the enemy, the German Hun, has retreated from the area beyond no man's land, and has relocated to a position somewhat further away, possibly 8 to 9 kilometres, and he's in waiting to spring a surprise attack on a number of divisions in that area, which is near a French town, and that the two men selected, Blake and Schofield, their mission is to engage the commanding officer in that area, Mackenzie, and give him a message to abort the attack that he's about to carry out on enemy positions, because in fact it's basically going to lead to extreme loss of life, because basically the information that he's got is not correct, and he is unaware of these extra German divisions that are going to slaughter his troops. So there we have it. The mission is delivered almost on a plate. It rang so many bells with me with regard to Apocalypse Now, and the fact that the agent Willard is given another mission of similar craziness, to go upriver to kill the American colonel. So those are the parallels that immediately came to mind in this initial few minutes of this movie. So then the journey as such begins as the two men climb up a small ladder and start to walk across no man's land. And it's at this point that the terrain changes, and the cinematography is absolutely tremendous. We have first witnessed dead carcasses of horses, a mangled mesh of barricades, corpses are littered everywhere. It's a barren wasteland of sludge, death and emptiness, and you can almost smell the sound. One point I do want to say, though, is that this movie shouldn't be watched on a small laptop computer. I'm sure if I'd watched this in a huge cinema on a big screen with a great sound, it would have had far more of an impact. But just to say that you could, even on a laptop, you could almost smell the stench. And then we get the soundtrack meandering in as they hesitantly walk across, expecting some fire from German enemy troops, but nothing. So a piano saunters through the mud as the two approach the front line of the German trenches, and they find an underground bunker. They explore, and it was clearly used for the wounded. It's like a small hospital, but it's all deserted apart from rats that are intent on feeding off these bags that are hanging from the empty bed frames. And then all of a sudden Schofield spots a tripwire, and the rat inadvertently triggers it, and there's a huge explosion, and the bunker caves in, and Blake miraculously rescues Schofield as he's immersed in rubble, and they slowly manage to find a way out of the horror, and this epitomizes the type of mission that they're on. The unexpected could lead to immediate death. They withdraw from that situation, and the wasteland becomes more apocalyptic. They see guns destroyed, a tank, everything is left in a state of decay amidst all the corpses, and they then walk through a clearing and find some green pastures after recovering from the explosion in the bunker. And as they sort of collect their thoughts, it's worth noting that in the less sort of dangerous moments, short talk is carried out by the two men. There's a discussion about medals and the symbolism of retaining those medals. Schofield has already received a Medal of Honor, but he in fact traded it for a bottle of wine because he was thirsty, and Blake considers this to be very, very ungrateful. And a story is related of a rat desperate for food biting off the ear of a fellow soldier. And then we see cherry blossom, and Blake describes cherry trees back in England which bear fruit for his family. We then come to some buildings, and at that point Blake and Schofield witness a dogfight between three aircraft, two on their side and one on the German side. Eventually the German aircraft is shot down, and then all of a sudden, as it crashes to the ground, it is seen hurtling towards the empty buildings where they're resting up. They manage to survive as the blazing plane comes to rest, and because of the nature of the situation, the men tried desperately to retrieve the pilot from the aircraft, whilst the flames are engulfing it. At this point, Schofield, aware that there's a need for water because the German is saying that he needs water, goes away and finds a bucket of cow's milk, and at the point that he's about to retrieve it, there's a scream, and the German has stuck a knife in the stomach of Blake, and we then are faced with an emerging crisis where Blake is fighting for his life. A very dramatic, emotionally powered scene then comes about. This is after Schofield has murdered the Hun pilot, where Blake is trying to talk to Schofield and asks him, "Am I dying?" Schofield, after some hesitancy, says, yes, I think you are. And we savour the last few moments of Blake's life as he asks favours of Schofield in trying to find his brother at the destination that they were both planning to go to warn the colonel of the imminent attack by the Germans. It's brutally powerful, and as Schofield nurses Blake in his last moments, he then goes about the business of removing the dog tags and the jury, and at that point a company arrives thankfully of his own men, who find him staring blankly into space and comfort him to an extent, and he is invited to join them in the travel a little closer to the destination. He's completely shell-shocked after what has happened, and this is a symbolic of how this story is delivered, the impact on Schofield, and you are completely immersed in it as you witness it. He's now sitting in the back of a lorry, hearing young squaddies describing funny anecdotes about being away from home, and he is completely silent, and you sense that he's thinking that these young squaddies are just days away from their imminent death. And then, of course, his desperation to get to his location to fulfill the mission draws panic when the lorry gets stuck in the mud, and we get this crazy scenario where all hands on deck are made to release the lorry from the mud that's ensuing and stopping it moving, and there's a half-heated chat about why the Germans are here amongst the boys, which I found very poignant. He is then forced to continue alone based on some practical difficulties with the lorries, and he then advances alone into a derelict town, and at this point daylight changes into night. He tries to cross on an iron beam to get across the river, and is subject to a sniper attack, and we then witness the first bit of combat really that Schofield has had with this German sniper. It is quite powerful, to say the least, and brought back some memories of the Big Red One reconstruction, as he goes about an empty building trying to outwit this sniper. We then are plunged into a deep black night, but far away there's an inferno of flames going about, and we then see the silhouettes, the illuminated wreckage of the town, and he frantically tries to run from cover from shots that are almost sort of randomized, and there's the destruction is beyond belief. But it again brought back memories of Apocalypse Now, but the last outpost before they went into Cambodia. This complete craziness that it existed, where there are no rules, and it's a sense of doom and isolation. The sepia image in here is awesome, and then he sees an altar, a German altar, and the inferno must have been reminiscent of Dante's, maybe, and he is forced to flee from a soldier who's chasing him and firing at him without any real aim, and it's a real situation of complete and utter fear and panic. And he escapes and kills the German and his mate, who follows in, and then comes across a solitary French girl who is taking care of a newborn baby. At this point, some tenderness is introduced to the movie, a rarity in this a catastrophic disaster of war, and the baby's need for milk prompts him to give the milk that he took from the place where Blake was murdered, and this humane gesture sticks very readily in the mind, amidst all the inhumanity that surrounds him. He then continues on with his journey, and he gets to a clearing and hears an almost a religious service being delivered to troops in a clearing with some trees. These men are actually the company that he needs to get to pass on his message regarding the fate of the next phase of the operation. But he is so stunned, he sits motionless, and around him men try to engage him, try to talk to him, but he's completely shell-shocked. And we then move on to the fact that he has this message and wants to find Mackenzie, the commanding officer there, and the film then continues to the point where he completes his mission. He sees the Mackenzie, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. He finds the brother of Lance Corporal Blake. He's able to share with both of them what he has been told to do. And at this point, the movie slides to its conclusion. Once the final curtain comes down, we have time to reflect on the craziness, reflect on the and there's also an amazing film scene which I forgot, where he gets this is before he hears the men receiving this religious message. He swims down a swelling river and down through a waterfall and barely escapes with his life. This is after the incident in the town, the desolate town, and he becomes like floating debris as he desperately tries to get to the bank, climbing over drowned corpses and other debris, before engaging with the company who are receiving this religious message. So I know there's a bit of a plot spoiler involved in this review, but I don't think it would take anything away from the experience of watching this journey. And I was so impacted by the whole event, that is only one day in this 4-year war, that I was almost weeping at the end, particularly when the credit came up and Mendes writes that it's in memory of his own grandfather who fought in World War I, and that immediately locked into my knowledge of my grandfather, who also fought in World War I, and it made me wonder what experiences he may have had that he didn't share with me, and I don't know whether he shared with my father. It all means so much, these movies, that they highlight your own individuality and your own family involvement, to the point that it becomes an acute emotional journey. So it goes without saying that this is the best movie I've seen in 2019. It jumps ahead of The Irishman, and it's a wonderful war film, and I'm really pleased that I've seen it, and I really do feel that you should take the time to see this movie. 1917, directed by Sam Mendes.